Hello, 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 class. It's lecture time. In this lecture, we're going to talk about some basic legal principles and informed consent versus implied consent. So, healthcare consumers and patients are more aware and more critical and much more willing to sue anyone that their lawyer believes has been at fault, including healthcare workers who are collecting blood specimens. So, you can be sued individually as well as the facility where you work. Informed consent. Informed consent is the voluntary permission given by a patient to allow touching, examination, and or treatment by healthcare providers. Without informed consent, intentional touching can be considered a criminal offense. In the healthcare environment, patients must be informed of the possible consequences of having or not having particular medical treatments. This does not mean you cannot threaten the patient in any way if they refuse to have their blood drawn. An informed consent form is signed by the patient for approval of medical treatments, including blood collection. Documentation is an important aspect of informed consent in phlebotomy procedures. And along with consent, it is the patient's belief that the healthcare worker to whom consent is given has the knowledge, skills, and technical ability to perform such tasks. So the patient expects the phlebotomist to know the proper blood collection techniques and procedures. And another way patients may give you consent for venipunctures is by holding out his or her arm, rolling up a sleeve, or simply turning the arm in the correct position for the blood collection procedure. Here's an illustration of a proper way to get informed consent versus the improper way. Here on the left, we see the physician asking the patient, do you understand everything we discussed about your proposed treatment? And do you have any questions? As opposed to him walking up and saying, you need to sign this standard form. So let's talk about implied consent. In emergency situations, an emergency removes the need for informed consent. This occurs when the patient's nonverbal behavior indicates agreement. An implied consent exists when immediate action is required to save the patient's life or to prevent permanent impairment of the patient's health. So the essence of implied consent is that if the person was able to sign the consent form, they would. An implied consent varies from state to state, so you need to know any legal boundaries of implied consent because someday you may need to perform a vital emergency procedure, for example, CPR. And some patients have what's called a DNR, which in which they've signed in advance saying that they don't want any type of resuscitative measures done. So this is just something that may be passed on to you by the nurse, in the event that the patient becomes unresponsive or something. So here's our little cat and dog talk, in which the dog says, I did not say you could climb on my head. And the cat says, I did it last month. Doesn't that mean I have implied consent? And no, it does not. You have to get implied consent each time you are performing a venipuncture procedure on the patient. It doesn't matter if you just did a procedure 10 minutes before that, they still have the right to refuse, and so you would still need to have their implied consent to draw blood again. So that's all I have today. Your assignment will be to explain to me as a phlebotomist how you would obtain consent from patients. And that's all I have today. I'll see you guys next lecture. Bye-bye.